Well, I hope you got a sense for how we simplify radicals. You may be wondering why that's something we need to learn how to do at this point. I'm going to show you the next topic now, and actually it's not going to take us very long, but you're going to have a couple days to work on this and practice this, and I think before you get done, you'll be in pretty good shape. So it turns out that not every quadratic equation can necessarily be factored, or necessarily has to be factored. There are other ways to solve quadratic equations besides taking factors, and one of those ways is to solve with square roots. We're actually going to talk about something that I just hinted at in the last video, but we'll look in a little bit more depth right now. Before I forget, next Wednesday, that is going to be the 22nd of April, I've got a quiz for you. So it'll be a quiz over these first few sections of Chapter 9. This will be part of fourth quarter, of course. So you know that's coming. I'll give you some more advanced notice about that next week, but you can look for that to be available for download early next week, and like to get those submitted and returned, or completed and returned to me by the 22nd before we move on. Okay, so what we're going to start with a really, really simple problem. And I don't know that I can make these overly complicated. I've got 4 examples here, and they're just going to get progressively more complex, but they're not really any of them that bad. Let's start with the first one. X squared equals 49. So it's tempting to think that the answer to this is x equals 7. And I will tell you that one of the answers to this is 7, but there are 2 answers. So a little thing to remember, whenever you see x squared, you're going to see 2 answers. So how do we get the 2 answers? Well, if you were thinking, hey, I can do one of these properties of equality where I can, as long as I have an equation here, I can take the square root of both sides. That's absolutely right. So x equals 7 is definitely one of the answers. And the square root of 49 is 7. But because of the unique nature of squared values, it turns out that there's another value that if we multiply it by itself, it'll also come up to 49, and that is -7. So the answers are 7 and -7. The question is, how do we get from the square root of 49 to -7? So this is where it's going to get a little bit tricky, and I'm going to get a little bit mathy here, and this is a little bit maybe advanced beyond where you're super comfortable, but I want to give it to you because it's accurate. The square root of 49 is 7. That is a fact. What we do when we solve quadratic equations by taking a square root is we take both the positive square root and the negative square root. So I'm not saying that the square root of 49 is -7. I'm saying that when we solve this equation by taking a square root, and that square root is 7, our answers will be the positive 7, but also the negative version of that root, which is -7. And we know that -7 times -7 equals 49. In fact, I'll write it here. -7 times -7 equals 49, and 7 equals 49. Okay? So the moral of the story is, when you solve with square roots, and by with square roots, I mean by taking a square roots, you get 2 answers. And it's not so much that the final answer is necessarily going to be the plus or minus, but at some point you'll be doing plus or minus the square root. So we're going to be looking now at opportunities for us to use this solving by taking a square root method and then taking plus or minus the square root. Now, there's a couple of rules we have to follow here. And the first one I just want to hit at really carefully here is do not take a square root. You can probably picture me in class. Do not take a square root. But maybe not quite that rude. Until you have x squared all by itself. Okay, and by x squared, I mean it could be y squared or t squared, whatever. The squared term has to be all by itself before you take the square root. So here's the next example. Minus 3x, this is example number 2. Minus 3x squared equals minus 36. Okay, and by the way, I want to remind you that we don't take the square roots of negative numbers. There's nothing that we can square at this point that's going to get us a negative number. So immediately, this should look like bad news to you. Like, how do I take the square root and get a negative number? Oh, wait a minute. I don't have x squared all by itself. So how do I get x squared all by itself? I divide by the thing that isn't x squared. And that gives me now, these cancel, I get x squared equals, the minuses cancel, I get x squared equals 12. Cool. Now we take the square root. Remember our rule? When you solve with square roots, you get 2 answers, plus or minus square root. So when I take the square root here, I'm going to get x equals plus or minus the square root of 12. But a few days ago, you learned how to simplify square root of 12. That is plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, which is plus or minus 2 square root 3. So to be clear, we have an answer x equals 2 square root 3 and an answer x equals minus 2 square root 3. And as we expected, we get 2 solutions, and they are plus or minus the square root of the number we were solving for. Notice that 36 is not part of our answer, 3 is not part of our answer, 12 is the magic number that we use to calculate our answer. So this one's a little bit more complicated than the last one because we had to do something to this left side here, this right here, in order to get it ready to take the square root. Okay, so far? Got a couple more for you. Here's example 3. Remember, one of the advantages of having this recording is you can go back and watch this again. Like when I'm in class, I have talk, and then, okay, let's go in and do your work. And you're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't understand anything you just said. Well, now you can at least go back. You might still not understand what I'm saying, I get that. But you can at least go back and hear it a second time, and maybe you can look at your book and walk through some things on your own. So you don't have to feel like you get one shot at this one. All right. 2x squared minus 5 equals 17. I see a whole lot of problems here. The main problem is that I don't have x squared by itself. So I got to do a whole bunch of things now to get x squared by itself before I can even contemplate taking a square root. So a little review question here. What's the first thing? I'll give you options. Option 1 is divide everything by 2. Option 2 is add 5 to both sides. I hope you chose option 2 because the 5 is least connected to the x. The 2 is pretty close there. So I have 2x squared equals 22. Okay? Now, it's pretty obvious the only thing left is divide by 2, and x squared equals 11. 11? I don't know the square root of 11. Great. You don't have to. Square root, x equals, what do we do when we take a square root? Plus or minus square root of 11. That's where you stop. Don't pull out a calculator. Don't try to get some decimal answer. Just leave your answer as the square root of 11. Just like over here, we didn't settle for plus or minus the square root of 12. We went all the way down to plus or minus 2 square root of 3. So the moral of the story here is get it so that you have x squared all by itself, then you can take the square root. Okay, you got one more? And you? That's it. We had kind of a nice, short, sweet lesson today. Hopefully a couple of days where things go pretty well. How about this one? 3x squared plus 12 equals 3. Good. You call the shots here. What do you want me to do? What's that? Oh, subtract 12? Got it. All right. Subtract 12. 3x squared equals minus 9. It's cool because 3 goes into 9. Some of you right now already know that this is not going to work. But for everybody else, let's go through this. Divide by 3, divide by 3, x squared equals minus 3. Okay? We've done what we needed to do, right? We got rid of all the stuff that wasn't the x squareds. Now all we have left is x squared. Now we can take square root. Uh-oh. See the problem? I can't take the square root of a negative number. There's no number I can think of that when I square it comes out to be minus 3. So this one is a no solution. Pick any number you want, plug it in there, you're not going to get it to 3x squared plus 12 is going to equal 3. So when you have to do something bad, like take the square root of a negative number, you end up with with no solution. So keep an eye out for that. I mentioned that some of you even knew that right here. You might have been able to tell that we were headed towards the square root of a negative number, and that would have been a problem. So this is not really designed to be a trick question. It's a question to really make sure that you're paying close attention to this and following the rules. So let me just go back. Very simple problems here. X squared equals 49. Take the square root plus or minus 7. No problem. A little bit more complicated problem over here. We got rid of the minus 3. It all worked out to x squared equals 12. Take the square root. We had to do a little bit of simplifying in our final answer, but it worked out just fine. This one, we had to add 5 to both sides, then divide by 2. Then we get x squared equals 11, which is a little bit funky, but our answer is just x squared equals plus or minus 11. Sorry, x equals plus or minus 11. And then finally this one that looked actually pretty good. I mean, 3 goes into 12. Everything works out nicely, except that there's no, I can't take the square root of a negative number and get an answer. So no solution to that. So that's it. Practice this for a couple days. I'll write the assignments down here. Quiz on Wednesday. So let's see, today is Friday, so we're on number 8 here. It's page 379, 6 through 15, 23 through 39 odd. Number 9, so this is Friday, this will be Monday. There's a CUDA, square roots. 1, I want you to do 1 through 16 on that page. Tuesday, there's a different one. So it's CUDA, but it's square root 2. You can do all of those. And then Wednesday is going to be a quiz, 9.1 to 9.4. So basically, the idea of solving a quadratic equation, a little bit how it connects to a graph, solving by factoring, simplifying radicals, and solving by taking the square roots. So Wednesday quiz, then Thursday and Friday, so this is Thursday, Friday, this is for 23 and 24. New stuff. So I'll have a lesson for you next Thursday and Friday. All right. Have a great weekend. Be well.